Welcome to the Preventive Medicine Podcast. Help us change the paradigm of medicine from keep people alive to help people thrive, one episode at a time. And now, here's the show.
Yeah.
I know we'll probably touch on this misinformation part because I know on your website you talk about doing better than what the fitness industry has to offer.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to make sure we get back to first, you mentioned a lot already about your social media and everything that you're doing right now. But was there like a defining moment when you decided you wanted to start doing that? Because a lot of people go into science, they go into like being an athlete in the past, but don't go that route of kind of disseminating that information in a like actual coherent manner that people can like adhere to and actually incorporate.
Yeah. So like I said, I started my podcast, my Instagram in my master's. And so I was still powerlifting at that time and screwing around with fitness and kind of really just figuring out what I wanted to do with myself in my life. So there wasn't a major direction. I just had the page and I was sharing stuff and like little bits of information, but none of it was coherent. Mm-hmm. And so when I started my PhD, I actually originally started at another program. I was at the University of Vanderbilt and I was going to be a molecular physiologist, but then I left because I was like, I want to do exercise. Like this just isn't for me. And it was kind of in that transition, I really realized what I wanted to do with my life and what I wanted to be. And I was like, no, I want to be in exercise physiology. Like I want to work with humans and do preventative, like research that has to do with like hands-on with people, but stuff that I care about that's like exercise and nutritional practices that are more preventative and like use that to help educate the masses on whatever spectrum or scale that I can on implementing these things now rather than just hiding in a lab pipetting where there's nothing wrong with that. But for me, I was like, I love people and I care about them and I want to find a way to bridge that gap between exercise physiology and the public. And there are some really good named people doing that, but most of the voices in the fitness industry are just louder than that. And so it was literally like I left that program and I knew I was restarting my PhD that spring. And so I kind of started to take those action steps to doing that. And I kind of started to be a little more focused on my Instagram. And then I launched my business officially like that next spring. And so that first year of 2018, I was just really trying to figure out more of the direction and the niche of my voice of what I wanted to do. And in being a more engaged with the Instagram community and trying to grow that and seeing that resistance of people to like, just trying to figure out how to get science and good information to people in a way that like they wanted to receive it was like a lot of trial and error. And so I worked really hard at just like growing my message and my page and just getting people to buy into that approach to fitness and health. And it really was the beginning of last year, 2019. One of my really good friends on my social media friends, Jessie Hoffman, she has a PhD in nutritional sciences. And I remember messaging her or something like New Year's Day, like January 19, I was like, 2019 is the year that we are going hard in Instagram and we're going to take it back and we're going to bring science to the light and we're going to call this crap. And I just kind of like, I just sat and played too safe for so long and it wasn't helping and it wasn't growing. I was like, okay, well, whatever, I'm going to get loud, which luckily I'm someone in science who is getting loud, which helps my message. But it really was just this moment where I was so sick of everything the fitness industry was and playing safe and being nice and being like, here's some science, everyone please listen. Like no one wanted to hear that. So I was like, well, I'm going to just start calling this crap out and putting it on blast and like, but not like specific people, but just like these messages and trends that are just, I think, really crappy. And so I just kind of let it loose. And I was getting more confident in my knowledge as someone in the field in science. Like I was in the second year of my PhD at that point. So, you know, I had 3 years of upper level education and a lot of experience. So I was like, okay, I feel more comfortable like being able to converse about these topics, knowing like I have a little bit of legitimacy to do so. And so I was just like, we can all do so much better for people with this. And so last year I pushed and I started doing like swipe post and more informative, like science heavy posts, but like with little infographics and like ways that people could digest it and they wanted to see it. And I made them pretty because like I'm a female and like that's my brand. And it was just really that 2019 mark where I was just like, this is all crap. And we can come together and there's enough really smart people in this field doing good work that are maybe playing safe as well, that it can all rise up and raise their voices a little bit louder. And if there's enough of us saying the same thing enough over and over and over, like we're slowly going to have to create some sort of change, right? Because eventually that message is just going to be so overwhelming for the people that kind of cross share between us that they're going to be like, okay, so maybe my crash diet and like 75 HIIT workouts a week aren't working. I'll listen to this group of psychos. Like maybe I'll finally like buy into this. And so really it was just last year, it was just like, I was like, that's it. I'm done. Break it loose. Like let's go. So
do you feel like it was hard in terms of, so I feel like in science, it's so hard to be definitive about anything that you say, just because we're almost like it's ingrained in us to be unsure, right? To question ourselves, question what we know, and, hold our opinions relatively lightly, because, literature and data changes all the time, and that kind of shifts our opinions with things. So was that a barrier for you to start in terms of like, okay, I want to be louder with this, but was there some hesitancy? Like, I don't want to be loud about the wrong things, and then next year I'm changing my opinion. Or to the outsider, it looks like, oh, well, she was wrong about this. Now she's changing her opinion, versus how like we would see it as like, yes, you're correcting your opinion with the data that you have. So was that something that kind of held you back in terms of going all in on being a louder voice for fitness?
So I think a little bit at first. I mean, I still feel that way. Like anytime I post anything, if you read my captions, you can see how careful I'm being in almost anything when I'm discussing science or literature. Like I'm almost adding like caveat to caveat to caveat to everything we say and do. Because one, everything's so polarizing. I'm not trying to start a war in my comments for things that I'm just trying to converse about. And two, it's the more you go and you're in school and you learn, the more I realize like I'm not an expert on every single one of these niches, but I know enough that I can communicate like this with a gen pop to the degree of which they need to understand it. So there's always more to be known about every single subject. And that's really hard for me, because when I post about anything, I'm like, oh, there's probably some extra layer to this that I don't even know exists, or I haven't read enough about, because you can never read or learn enough about anything, and then it changes. So I think for now, I still feel that, but in the beginning, I wasn't confident enough. And I think in my just being such a young like PhD student, scientist, and researcher, you always have that imposter syndrome, and you're not as confident in your skills and your knowledge base to begin with. And I was just playing safe. So people could see that, I think, in my captions. So they weren't as catchy and zam and like as well written, because I was just trying so hard to be like, please, just like this. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to step on any toes. So it was hard and scary to do that. But I think one of the things that motivated me the most was the fact that like the only voices in at least the exercise physiology specific field of industry leaders are men, and they're all doing that. You know what I mean? And they're being loud and they're speaking out. There's the Lane Nortons and like the Alan Argons and the Brad Schoenfields and like all those people. And they're in the dietitian industry, there's a lot more female. So I always say that with a caveat, like I'm just in like, it's not that there aren't a lot of female voices on Instagram, but I was like, well, if they can be loud and change their opinions and share science, I was like, I can too. Right. So I was just like, okay, well, maybe I'm just being scared because I don't want to be like the big loud bitch, because that's what you get framed as, I guess. Sorry if I swore on your podcast, but it kind of was just that breaking point for me where I was like, no, like I would take topics and things that I was mostly pretty sure that what I was saying was accurate enough that if anyone saw any flaw in it, it would just be like intelligent discourse rather than like putting me like really like putting me on blast for something. And so I was always really careful about like, if I talked about something, it wasn't too far out of my niche that I wasn't sure enough on what I knew that I could confidently put it out there and be like, this is mostly as accurate as I possibly know it to be. So it's like learning that and navigating that within your own self. But it's also had to challenge me as someone in this field who still feels like they're 10 years behind everyone else and they're never going to be that smart, to trust in what I do know. So it's kind of been a little bit of that learning curve and lesson, but it did take a lot of like confidence in like, I mean, I'll like research for some of my posts. Like I'll literally do little mini lit review research things just to make sure that like what I'm saying is the most up to date. Cause I just am you get so scared that someone's just going to be like, well, little Liz is an absolute fraud because she was off on like one number in her post. Like, let's bring her down. So I still feel that way a little bit, but it definitely took a lot of confidence and just, it was kind of scary every time you post anything slightly controversial or anything that's just maybe potentially just a hair out of like 100% of what you know, and just making sure that what you're sharing, at least of that, is as accurate as
Preventive medicine is an incredibly important topic. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video. For the full episode, find us on your favorite podcast streaming platform. If you enjoyed this video, don't hesitate to hit that subscribe button, like this video, and share it to keep that message spreading. Thank you once again for watching this video, and we'll see you in the next one.